Welcome, listeners, to season 6 of the Dudes of the Dead podcast. We are back, and we are back with a brand new studio. We spent the last day or two setting this up, and hopefully you like the look of it. I think it looks pretty good.
Yeah, me too.
Awesome. So, season 6, our theme this season is going to be all new horror movies. We had some other ideas, but when we looked at the lineup for 2024, basically starting from May, June, all the way until December, it's banger after banger after banger of notable, really interesting films. So we thought, let's just cover all 2024 horror films. And there's a lot of good ones. I don't even know if we'll get to all of them.
Yeah, because I think I haven't done this is tallies. I think I've seen 5 of 2024 films already. And that only started like in April, maybe.
Because we were commenting last season how slow the year felt at the beginning. But it's more than made up for it now. So
exactly.
So I hope you like our theme for this season, season 6, all new horror movies. And we want to make sure we also thank everyone who listened or watched or liked or commented or subscribed to our YouTube channel, or if you listen in the audio for your favorite podcatcher.
Or sneezed during one of those things or something.
Yeah.
And also please notice that we have the same shirt on. We have our Pearl shirts.
Pearl. So if you can't tell from the shirts, this episode we will be reviewing MaXXXine.
Indeed.
And this will be a thrilling theater episode as we just got back from the movie seeing MaXXXine. So we won't have notes or anything because we just saw it. But before that, we have a quick cut.
Yes, we do.
And for this took some convincing, which might give you a hint to what this film is. But we're going to do the same quick cut because we actually watched this together.
Yes.
Took a lot of arm twisting to get Leatherface to watch this one. This is none other than Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey 2.
Now, to be fair, I had my reservations going in. I just want to give a shout out to Aaron Jabs, who, if you listen regularly, he's been a guest on the pod, and he also does our outro music. And he was the first one to comment, I think, in our horror group on Facebook that he'd seen it and he feels like it was actually way better. I'm like, because I respect his opinion based on things.
I'm hurt. I suggested Blood and Honey 2 like 5 times, and you just swore at me every time. So
I know, but I don't think he's as big a Nicolas Cage fan as you are.
That's true.
We'll
I don't know if anyone is.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, thanks, Aaron. It was actually not just marginally better; it was quite a bit better than the original.
Yeah, I was impressed.
Yeah.
Did you want to break that down at all, or?
Well, I don't know that the story was better. The performances were better. The masks and like clothing and stuff was a little grittier, a little more. It looked like they actually had a budget,
not like a hillbilly wearing like a mask from Walmart.
Totally.
Yeah.
So yeah, all of those things. I mean, the production value was better, performances were better, script was better, story was more believable in that realm.
And just from the opening scene, you could tell they were trying to have some fun with it,
yes.
which is what you should be doing for Winnie the Pooh, I think. Now, actually, one of my critiques, though, I feel like tonally it was quite inconsistent, though, to the point where it took itself quite seriously in the middle. Like almost too melodramatic. And it's a credit to the actor, which I wrote down here somewhere. Oh, yeah, Scott Chambers, who does Christopher Robin. He was actually like really good.
He was good.
And so good that he's almost getting the audience into the melodrama of it, which I feel like is unnecessary. So I almost feel like it still took itself a bit too seriously. It could have just had more fun.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, it was dealing with some serious topics, but there's always room in that kind of genre, there's room to have fun, I think.
But then they jump to like it's like a dance.
Yes.
Like a party. Oh, what do you call that? Like a rave?
Yeah.
Nightclub.
Yeah.
And there's some hilarious kills and stuff in there. So at times they just have a lot of fun with it. And then other times they still try to be very serious. But across the board, it was way better than the first one.
Yes, 100%.
Like it was one of the more fun movies I've watched this year.
And there wasn't anything that had me, questioning. It's like, oh, that's ridiculous or that's silly or like, why would they? It's like, don't get me wrong. It's still a silly film, but it's a better silly film than the first one was. Absolutely.
And I did really like the look of the monsters.
Yeah.
The Pooh and friends.
Yeah.
And they brought in some new friends
They
too,
did.
which was my critique of the first one. We won't spoil which ones, but
yeah.
It was actually surprisingly good. You recommend it then?
I would cautiously recommend it. Yeah. I mean, this is more of a fun Friday night popcorn movie, I think.
Yeah.
For most people, they could have some fun with this one. So yeah, I would cautiously recommend it. Like if let's put it this way. If you watch the first one like I did and thought, oh, this is ridiculous, you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Yeah.
if you like those kinds of films anyway, you'll love it. But if you're like really wanting whatever highbrow elevated horror, you're barking up
So
the
we
wrong
have this
tree.
on video and audio that Leatherface Lee officially recommends
Yes,
Winnie the
yes.
Pooh, Blood Honey 2.
Indeed. I do.
And they had a fun Easter egg for the Bambi film, I think.
Yes,
There's a
you
reference
mentioned-
to that,
yeah,
which
yeah,
I think
yeah,
is their
yeah.
next one.
Yeah,
So
okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, rent it, stream it, do whatever you need to do.
There you go. Bet you did not see that coming. All right, and our main feature for today is MaXXXine. This was directed by Ty West and starring the incredible Mia Goth, Charlie Rowan McCain, and Kevin Bacon. I had not seen anything in quite some time.
No, that was a good role for him, I thought.
Yeah. So this was, of course, the third in the trilogy after X and Pearl. We're wearing our Pearl t-shirts matching. So this has a 6.9 on Internet Movie Database and a 75% critic score / 79% audience score on Rotten Tomatoes at the moment. That might change because this just came out a couple days ago.
Mm-hmm.
So that may evolve over time. The premise is in the 1980s Hollywood, adult film star and aspiring actress MaXXXine Minx finally gets her big break. But as a mysterious killer stalks the starlets of Hollywood, a trail of blood threatens to reveal her sinister past. And you actually watched X last night, right? In preparation for this?
Yeah.
And I did not, but I've seen X a couple times and Pearl. So what did you think?
And
we will, as always, do non-spoilers
Yes.
to start, and we'll jump into spoilers afterwards.
Yes, no spoilers, but for me, the trilogy would unfold as X, MaXXXine, Pearl.
In terms of your preference?
In terms of how good I thought the films were.
Okay.
Now, it is personal preference because I did not like Pearl as much as you did.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't given it a fair shake. Like I haven't gone back to rewatch it. I started rewatching it last night. I'm 100% behind. Like Mia Goth is incredible in it. Her performance. It's the story that didn't quite.
You're talking about Pearl.
Pearl.
Right.
It kind of took me out of it. MaXXXine, I've been looking forward to because I wanted to see the follow-up from X.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
What was your level of anticipation for this? Or like, did you go in with very high expectations? Was this one of your more anticipated?
I'd say it's probably one of my more anticipated for 2024.
Right.
But I think my expectations were tempered because I didn't enjoy Pearl as much as X. So I was like, okay, well, I now know that he could be hit or miss.
That's fair.
As a director for me.
Yeah.
Because like House of the Devil was great and other things that he's done. But that doesn't mean that everything was going to hit with me. So that's kind of how, and for me, this one didn't disappoint. But we can get into details after.
Yeah, I've been struggling with this a little bit just in the last hour since we've seen it. I think what I'm going to say is I feel like MaXXXine is almost like the best of the three in terms of like technical ability and like what it's doing symbolically. And I think it is trying to say a lot. But in terms of my own personal enjoyment, I'd probably put it at the bottom.
Yeah, I figured that.
Like I liked X and I liked Pearl. And I think I appreciate MaXXXine, but I don't know if I would ever feel drawn to go back and watch it for like entertainment's sake.
Okay, interesting.
And do you feel that way or no?
I don't. Yeah, that is an interesting question because I think last night was the third or fourth viewing I've seen of X. This one wouldn't have the same draw for sure.
Like I think X is kind of a fun film.
Yeah,
and it's more simple in what it's trying to do.
Yes.
There's a lot to grapple with in MaXXXine. Like I almost found myself trying to puzzle out what he was trying to say or what the message was. And it wasn't as accessible or maybe not as just entertaining to watch.
Yeah. And I think I'm going to speculate because I think part of the reason for that is that the 1980s is almost a character in itself in this film. And that adds a whole layer of complexity.
Yes.
Because if like for me, that was great because I was looking at, like the, what's the Strangler. His name was the
The Night Stalker.
Night Stalker, not
Yeah.
Strangler. I was thinking Boston Strangler.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, that whole Richard Ramirez thing. It's a fascinating serial killer case. The makeup, the music, the looks, the car, like that was all, I think, integral to the movie. Whereas in X, you saw that it was 1979 at some point, and
Yeah.
you could tell by the way they were dressed. But
It wasn't the same kind of
No,
time capsule
no,
that this one is.
no,
And that one just felt like a bit of an homage or tribute to Texas Chainsaw Massacre
Totally.
a little bit.
totally.
And it was just a simple, more like kind of slasher film.
Yes.
And I don't know if I call this a horror movie almost at all.
Well,
Like that's the thing that threw me the most, is I feel like the other two at least were horror films. This one, it's never scary. And arguably it's more of a procedural / character drama. Like I struggle to see much horror in this.
okay, but so let me ask. So is it tone? Like, I don't see a lot of difference between X and this in terms of the actual things that happen on screen.
Oh, wow.
So,
I mean, I would disagree with that, but I also feel like that would be more for the spoiler section.
well, yeah, but so let me rephrase, because I don't think you need to have spoilers. I wonder.
So, for example, there's like the climax. Oh, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to say it during this section, but I will speak to this in the spoiler section.
Yeah, because I guess I see. Yeah, okay. So I get the procedural thing, because in the first one there are no cops. It's just it's kind of like an us and them kind of thing. And there's cops, but not in the same way.
Yeah.
They're the aftermath.
Yeah.
They come and find things. Kind of like in Kill Bill, where the sheriff kind of shows up and she's already been beaten up. But in this one, it's definitely follows that procedural trope, because they've got a set of or they've got a pair of plainclothes detectives who are working on a crime that they think she could help with.
And maybe I didn't watch the trailer and you did. So maybe the trailer helps set the tone for what this film is going to be about.
Maybe. I mean, I don't disagree with you that it follows more of those procedural tropes. I mean, it is more like a Silence of the Lambs.
Yeah, which you don't consider horror, right?
No.
Okay.
I don't.
So then you wouldn't consider this horror either?
I guess not. I mean, I guess if it came right down to it. But I guess my bigger question is asking about, okay, well, if you thought the first one was horror.
Yeah, I see definitely a difference between X and MaXXXine in terms of how it's executed.
Okay.
But we can talk about that in the spoiler section, I think.
Yeah, I can see some of that. I think I know where you're going.
Because, I mean, X almost feels like a bit of a mirror of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which is a classic horror film. You have like a group of people being picked off by a killer, and it's in an intimate kind of rural setting. I don't know. I feel like it felt like a slasher film.
Yeah.
This doesn't feel like a slasher film. This feels like, almost felt like I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood or something like Tarantino's. Like it was trying to capture that 80s vibe. You've got her doing the audition and the Hollywood stuff. And then you've got the cops trying to figure out what's going on. And then even the climax really, to me, didn't feel like a horror movie climax. Felt like more of an action film or.
Yeah, I can see some of that.
Not to say that's not good, but it's interesting that there's so many references in the film to like horror. And clearly I think this whole trilogy is kind of horror's relationship as a genre to like mainstream.
Right.
So then it's interesting to me that you wouldn't make it a horror. I don't know. It's an interesting movie. And this is just based on gut reaction. But that was sort of what I walked away thinking like, that didn't really feel like a horror movie to me. And not even almost on the border. There's some body horror, I think, for sure.
Yeah, there is. But definitely it follows more. Like I'm thinking of, have you ever seen Brian De Palma's Dress to Kill?
No.
So that's a police procedural. I mean, it's not, I don't think it's definitely not PC anymore. But it's got John Lithgow as sorry, if you haven't seen this film, it came out like in 1978. So go rent it or something. Sorry. So John Lithgow plays a cross-dressing killer.
Right.
And so that doesn't come across anymore. But my whole reason for mentioning this is that there are elements of that film and it's more of a police procedural kind of thing
Yeah.
that come up for me in this one too. It's like, oh, they're, because it was kind of that. Just trying to remember. I don't think it takes place in New York or LA. I think it's somewhere else, but it is that kind of gritty, seedy nightlife thing. I mean,
I think to Mia Goth's character in X, like she feels like a final girl, and she's kind of positioned as the victim. In this one, not to spoil anything, but she is a very different character. And actually, a lot of the brutal kills are actually coming from her, not from the killer. So she's almost so powerful in this film that you never get the sense that she is a victim or a final girl. Like, it doesn't have that feel to me.
I think the only thing I would add to that, though, for me, is that he gives her a reason for behaving that way.
Ty West, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think her fear of her past being discovered and altering the path that she wants her life to take is enough to drive her to do the things that she does.
Yes. But I think you could say that of dramas as well. Like,
yeah, sure.
Like, I guess it just didn't feel like a horror movie, but that's okay.
Yeah. And I don't know that I don't know that, and I certainly not trying to convince you, because I don't know that I 100% believe that it's a full-on horror. But if you look at things like Scream, those are, they definitely follow slasher tropes.
Yeah.
But is it a horror movie? I mean, we're not really scared. It's just people, wandering around the.
But I think that matters. Like, I think using horror film tropes means it's trying to operate as a horror film. Whereas, like, the tropes in this film almost don't come from horror. The tropes in this come more from dramas and procedurals.
Yeah, I think, though, I don't know, because I haven't. I'd be curious to know whether Ty West feels that this is in line with 1980s horror.
Right.
Because I'm thinking of another film, Body Double.
Mm-hmm.
And it totally reminded me, there's a scene in the club where they're playing Frankie Goes to Hollywood, Welcome to the Pleasure Dome.
Okay.
And I know that because I listened to Frankie Goes to Hollywood, and Body Double was an 84, I think, film. I'm trying to remember the director, but I don't remember the director. Anyway, there's a Frankie Goes to Hollywood scene in there, and it's in Hollywood as well. And the idea of that film is that there's an actor, small-time actor, who's been paid to kind of look after an apartment or something, condo. And he witnesses a murder, kind of like a mix of Rear Window and some other stuff. But he witnesses a murder, but he's kind of being set up to be the fall guy of the murder. But there's a scene in there where they play Frankie Goes to Hollywood's Relax.
Yeah.
Do you know that one?
I probably.
Well, I'm not going to sing it, but he's like, relax, don't do it till you want to go.
Oh, yeah, I think that rings a bell.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
So anyway.
I mean, there is that subgenre of horror, I guess, which is like serial killer.
Yeah.
And it does kind of fall in line of those, and those ones often are kind of on the border. But
so the reason I say that is because I wonder if in Ty West's mind, the original X was kind of like a riffing off of Texas Chainsaw for
sure, yeah.
And this one, I think, is riffing off of a bunch of 80s.
I think that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And not just procedurals, but I think he's ripping off sort of that 80s horror movie serial killer, which wasn't always a slasher, although that was the heyday of the slasher. Yeah, I don't know. That'll be interesting. I'll be curious to hear more about that.
So if you're watching on YouTube, maybe in the comments, I'd be curious to hear your opinion. Did you consider MaXXXine to be a horror film or more of a drama procedural?
Yeah,
with some gore.
Do tell us.
So let's not to dwell on this for too long, but what else did you like about it? I thought Mia Goth was amazing.
Yeah, as always. Her performance was really good. Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just trying to remember. In so many of the films that I've seen of her, there are those moments where she like turns on the light bulb. Like,
yes.
Do you remember a scene?
I think at the very beginning when she's doing the audition to me.
Okay.
When she's almost doing it in character.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
to me, that was like classic Mia Goth, where like she shifts and 100%, and she has an amazing performance. Kind of like the
Yeah.
yeah. So but I do think though, to your point, I felt like she was more dynamic in X and Pearl, and maybe her range isn't quite the same, or she's just not given the same opportunities to
Yeah,
demonstrate that range in this one.
I think that's it for me, is that she doesn't have the same, because I was thinking of Infinity Pool as well,
For sure.
where that one is like all over the map in a good way.
Yeah. Like if I were to show someone like, oh, you have to see Mia Goth, I don't think I would go to MaXXXine to show her off. I think
maybe not.
I
Yeah.
would show Pearl, or I would show Infinity Pool.
I think it's a more contained performance, but again, I come back to that idea that I think the premise is that we're dealing with MaXXXine 5 or 6 years after the first film.
And her character seems very evolved compared to
Yes.
X.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was very much young, influential, or able to be influenced by her, fiance in the first one.
Here she has a lot of control, a lot of agency.
Yes.
She's very powerful. Yeah, I feel like and you would know better than me because you watched it last night, but did you feel like her representation as a character was quite different compared to X?
Yeah.
Having just watched it?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's I don't know if I'm reading too much into this. I think there's a subtle shift in her control of her character. I feel like in X, she's meant to be, I'd say late teens, maybe early 20s at the most.
Yeah.
But she's more of a teenager. So there's more of that sort of teenage angst and uncertainty. This, I feel, is more of a woman in control of her.
She actually references at some point her age. I think she says, "Oh, I'm 34 now. Like I need to."
Yeah, she does. 33 or 34.
33 or 30. Yeah, I forget the exact year, but it's early 30s, anyways.
So she would have been older than what I'm suggesting if that chronology is true.
Yeah, that'd make her like mid 20s or something. Yeah.
But of course, she looks younger because she's fairly thin and she's got smooth skin and stuff. So you don't see an age thing. I missed some of the cast from X, though. I mean, the cast was good. There were some good cameos. I think is it Michelle Monaghan that did one of the cops?
Yes. She's good. Yeah.
Yeah. She's been in a few police procedural things, but the one that I know her from is True Detective season 1.
Yeah.
She's Woody Harrelson's
That's a
wife.
good point. The secondary characters here are fine. I think Kevin Bacon's probably the highlight.
He's the best. Yeah. Of the secondary ones.
Yeah. And everyone else is maybe more forgettable.
Yeah. I mean,
they're all done. They're all good.
The cast is good. The performances are good.
But they're a troupe of characters in X. I feel like they all had a bit more personality.
Yeah. And I missed Jenna Ortega's character. Because I just feel like she always brings something to the role that, maybe we missed here, because we do get some. I think the difference too for this one is that MaXXXine is the focus. So all the other characters revolve around MaXXXine. It's her manager. It's her friend in the video store.
The director, I guess, of their production that she's in.
Yes. Yeah. The woman.
She was good. Yeah.
She was good. The police.
What's it called? The Puritan 2? Is that the movie?
Puritan 2. Okay. Yeah. So I think that's part of the reason for the difference in feel is that in X, we had the older couple that are kind of unknown to us. Mm-hmm. And then we had the troupe of people who were there to make the movie. Now we get some inside information about each of those characters at some point or another in the movie. In this one, you get less of that. I mean, you don't know. It's intimated. It's hinted that her manager maybe has done some other things in his time.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it doesn't matter. I'm assuming that her friend in the video store was gay.
I got that.
Yeah, I got that vibe. And then the police, we don't see anything of their lives other than what they're doing. So I think that's a difference too in the feel, because there's not as much of an ensemble feel in this as in X, where it was like each of them playing off one another.
He is very good at setting, though.
Yeah.
Like I still remember from X, even though I haven't watched in a while, like that scene of the pond, the overhead shot, and the dock, and there's the barn, and like I still remember it all quite vividly. Like, and in this case, the way he represents the city, I think, is really good. Like the alleyways and the kind of grungy, like nightclubs and the the adult themed play. What do you
Yeah.
call them?
Pleasure domes.
Sure. Yeah. But it all the feel of the city in that 1980s, like he
Yes.
does a really good job of capturing that. Like technically everything is really good.
Yeah, and I like these kinds of films. Like, I mean, we've talked many times about our love of 70s movies. And I do like, I mean, so the reason I was thinking about that was in the 70s, you had often LA, or not LA, sorry, New York or Detroit as kind of the broken metropolises. And the 80s is where you started to have that fall of Hollywood. You know, you've
Yeah.
got LA Confidential was not set in the 80s, but was made in the 80s. I think there was a lot
It has
of
that vibe.
it has that vibe, right? And the I think the seedy time in LA and Hollywood was in the 80s.
Yeah.
Whereas in the 70s, it was New York and it was already being cleaned up.
Yeah.
But like all of that Hollywood strip, I mean, you look at all the hair metal bands were playing Guns N' Roses and all those Poison. They were all on the strip playing in the clubs.
And he really draws your attention to kind of the background. Like there's protests
Yeah.
in the background and reading the signs of the different protesters, and there's like news footage in the background. Like there's a real sense of time and place, which he kind of not so subtly maybe puts in the background, but I felt I was often trying to pay attention to those sorts
Yeah.
of things. And I don't feel like that was much of a factor in X or Pearl.
No, and I think you hit it
Like there's a lot more to try and pay attention to.
exactly.
Here, I
I think it's a much more ambitious film
Yes.
in how it's presenting the character. So I think I would absolutely agree with you that in terms of X and Pearl, I'm saying this not in a negative way, but they were simpler premises.
for sure.
And so consequently it made for a different film. Whereas this has so much going on because you have the level of whatever's going on from her background coming back to haunt her, but you also have the Night Stalker character. And they use some real footage. Some real film footage of him being arrested.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of cool because there's a great documentary on Netflix. I think it's called just The Night Stalker. I think it's 3 or 4 episodes, but they dig into that whole case with Richard Ramirez. And yeah, it's just morbidly fascinating if that's your
And maybe
deal.
that's partly what it was too. Like horror films, I think tend to be more simple. Like you've got your slasher, you've got your victims, and they get picked
Yeah.
off one at a time. Or you have your kid, you've got your priest, and you've got your exorcism.
Yeah.
But in this, maybe it felt more like a drama because there was lots of moving pieces, different characters. You've got the cops, you've got like societally what's going on. You've got like
Yes.
the 1980s time capsule bits, and so it felt more complex maybe. So maybe to me that's why it had more of a drama vibe. Because
So-
the other two were more simple and this one isn't. And not that that's a criticism,
No.
because I think I would stand by this might be I think the most ambitious. That's a good way that you put that.
But do you think, so I don't want to give anything away, but do you think there's some scarification that happens in the film? That seems to me to be a horror movie trope.
Yep.
There's definitely when a character comes from her past and they're in the pool area,
Yep.
that's meant to be.
It is, but then the way that scene ends was
Yes.
very not.
Yes.
That's why I was kind of expecting
Okay.
something more
Okay.
along a horror line. It's interesting too, actually, even though it's a trilogy and you have Mia Goth, tonally they're all quite different from each other. Do you think?
Yes. Yeah, I think that's what we've talked about. What threw me off in Pearl.
Yeah.
I couldn't catch the vibe on that one.
And this one feels very different to Pearl and X.
Absolutely.
So it's interesting that's a trilogy and it has unifying themes and obviously Mia Goth and that kind of like time capsule element, but they're very different totally from each other.
Very. And I think, I mean, my love of Texas Chainsaw Massacre is probably partially to explain why I really like X.
Yeah.
Because I feel that heat and what it must be like in Texas in the summertime. Although I have been in Texas in July and it's like that.
I think X is probably the most accessible. And I would imagine if you were to poll everyone who'd seen it, that would probably be the favorite just from an entertainment standpoint.
Yeah, I think possibly. Yeah.
Okay. So is there anything else that you want to talk about before we get into spoilers?
I don't think so. I think we need to, yeah, I think to have a better, well, more fulfilling discussion, we need to get into spoilers.
Okay, so do you recommend MaXXXine?
I do. I think if you enjoyed either of the first two films, I think there's lots to enjoy here. I think even if you enjoyed Pearl more than X, I think definitely if you liked X more, I felt a good, like, it was nice to have a sense of completion, because I was saying to you before the film started, like, I've been looking forward to this one because I really wanted to see where her story went.
Yes.
So that was good for me. So I would recommend it. I can't see, I guess maybe if your expectations were something like X,
Hmm.
maybe you'd be disappointed, but I think it's such a good film as a film.
Yes.
I would still recommend it.
Yeah, no, for sure. I still recommend it, and I do think it's a very well done film and is very interesting.
Yeah.
It wasn't as entertaining for me as the other two, but it's still definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, I agree.
But maybe go in with tempered expectations, or at least just expect a film that's very different than the other two.
Yeah, 100%.
But maybe knowing the way the trilogy's evolved, you would do that anyways. But yeah, it's worth watching. It's interesting. It's good.
So
Okay.
two recommendations.
Two recommendations.
And now we're going to spoilers.
Yeah.
Spoilers. Okay.
So I just had an upcoming thing spoiled for me.
Okay. So should we go back to what we were kind of talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd be curious for you to explain more about that.
Right. So I was really caught off guard. So if we go through the kills, right, or the body horror. So she has that nasty gnarly where she stomps on that guy's testicles.
That was so
and they zoom
brutal.
right in, it punctures through. But nothing about that scene was horror, right? Like she's got the upper hand.
Yeah.
Like that was a very empowering moment. Nothing about that was scary. Like I felt bad for him, obviously. And then she like goes off on Kevin Bacon and slashes his face
Yeah.
up with keys. So that's again her.
Yeah.
At the end, she shoots the guy in the head and blows his brains out. And then, so really the only time where she is in peril or the victim, psychologically, she's on the same level as, well, spoiler, the big twist is that it's her dad, right?
Yes, who's come. So, yeah, so we're in the spoiler section. So, how they frame this is with the character of the Night Stalker, the real life serial killer, and there's all these deaths happening around Maxine's character.
Yeah.
The idea is that her father has come back to redeem her, and he's made the same offer to her friends, and they don't want to be redeemed, so he has to kill them.
Right.
But of course, it throws it into question because there's already a real serial killer.
Yeah.
And so, you're not sure, well, did he develop some kind of weird thing with her and now he's going after her? And it was a twist for me. I didn't expect to see her father come back.
No, me neither. Yeah, for
so
sure.
I kind
Even though they kind of hint at it at the very beginning, I think the movie opens with the footage of her dad talking to her
Absolutely.
on film. So maybe if you were paying attention, that would be a clue.
Well, maybe, but in X, he's on the screen in the background. He's the preacher.
Yeah, that's true.
So, I mean, other than letting us know that she's run away from that. Okay, so anyway, I don't want to get...
Anyways, yeah, so she blows his brains out.
Yeah.
And then there's the shootout around the pool. So they finally capture her. She's tied up. And then the cops show up and just start shooting these guys, and she grabs a gun. So to me, like, nothing about that climax feels like a horror movie. Like in a horror movie, when you have a big shootout between the cops and
that's a fair point.
the villains, like to me, that just... nothing about that is horror. And there was never a time where like she's really being victimized. Her friends are actually like captured and killed off screen.
Yeah.
I think the only one which felt a bit horror was the guy in the video store.
Yeah.
To me, that was maybe the only scene the whole movie that maybe was evocative of a horror film in terms of how it was shot and what it's made the audience to feel. But you never really feel like MaXXXine is in any real danger. You're never like, she's never afraid or in suspense. Like she's always very much in control.
Yeah.
She's actually the one who's kind of a badass, like beating up everybody else and putting them out. So I think that shows the evolution of her character, and it makes her very powerful, and it makes it interesting, but it never felt like a horror movie to me. And a shootout with the police at the end is not something I would associate with the end of a horror. I don't even know I could think of a horror film that ends with the cops showing up and getting in a big shootout.
No, it's a small shootout, but I was just thinking of 7.
Yeah, I think 7 is darker, and the way
Oh,
the ending
100.
evolves, like it's
Yeah, 100%.
that's more of a horror ending than
Yeah. But okay,
you don't have a guy whip out a shotgun and they're
no. But
brawling in the pool and
okay, so my challenge to you on that was
yeah.
when we were talking about X, and I said, okay, so you've already answered affirmatively that there are some things that are horror tropes in this one.
Yeah.
So what makes X a horror film and this one not a horror film when arguably there's no police shootout, but there's similar kinds of kills where somebody's just blown away, somebody's just stabbed.
But that's what I guess I feel like X operates like a slasher, right? Like it is sort of a tribute to Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So
Sure.
you have your group of victims, you've got your killer, and one by one they're kind of picked off in horror movie fashion, right?
Yeah.
Like the way the kills are executed, and you feel some suspense for the victims. You have the kill. Like to me, that very much feels like any other slasher film. I mean, there's a twist to it, but
Sure.
the flow of it and the structure of it and how it's shot to me is very consistent with slashers.
Yeah.
Whereas to me, the conventions here don't feel like horror conventions really.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm just busting your balls pretty much.
Yeah.
I think
Pearl, I can't remember quite well enough, but I do remember there's scenes where she has like an axe. I think she's like murdering a dude in a barn, and like
yes.
I think the real problem is there's no psychological edge or fear. Like you never really feel tension or fear for any of the characters in the movie other than the video store guy.
And arguably you should, because I feel like Pearl is concerned about her past coming back to bite her.
Maxine, you mean?
I mean, sorry, yeah, Maxine. Yeah. But we don't feel that in her performance. What we feel is that control and power.
But that's not horror, right? Like being concerned about your past, that could be in any drama.
It could be, but it's often used in horror as a way, like your past coming back to haunt you.
But isn't horror about fear of being murdered or like possession
I think it can be about many things.
Yeah. I guess she always seems so confident and in control, and like she doesn't really display.
Yeah.
Like you don't get the sense that she's even, I mean, she wants to be famous.
And that's to my point that I'm agreeing with you that it probably doesn't play out like a horror film because she doesn't display, other than being a badass, she doesn't display any final girl tropes.
No.
Where she's in jeopardy and then she always has the upper hand.
Totally.
And takes control.
Yeah. And
so you never feel that she's in danger or somehow something's going to happen to her, because it's inconceivable. It's inconceivable that she wouldn't be in control.
Yeah.
Right?
Because in our top 10, I think we talked about You're Next.
Yes.
So like in You're Next, like she's a complete badass and she deals with all of the killers, but she's still, you get this set, you feel for her at times. There's times where she's in danger. Mm-hmm. There's times where she is threatened, and like you feel that sense of tension and danger. And I just never felt that with Maxine. Except for actually when she had the mold on her face or whatever. It was the only time where she seemed really vulnerable.
Now, would you feel differently if this were, and I realize it's a very hypothetical, but if we looked at X and Maxine as one film, as a continuation of her story, which it is, but it obviously takes place over separate time periods, would it then, is there anything that would say to you, okay, well then it's, or would you just say, yeah, the first half was
the first half? Yeah, I'd probably do that, honestly. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's interesting. I'll have to watch it again and maybe think about it and see what other people say. But yeah, just that was the impression I walked away with. And even when I go back, I don't know, it didn't feel like a horror film, but it was super interesting. So what is your take? Do you get the sense that Ty West sees himself as Maxine? That I wonder, is he saying, like, I'm a super talented, because her whole thing is like, she is an amazing actor.
Yeah.
But because she's done pornography, she will never be accepted in the
Right.
mainstream. And he seems to draw a lot of parallels between pornography and horror, is that they're both like outliers and they're both on the outs of like mainstream entertainment. And so her whole thing is she can never be famous as she wants to be because she's done porn. And I feel like, does he feel like he can never be mainstream because he's done horror? And I almost wondered if the point of the film was, because there was even a sign, it's like porn equals horror or something.
Yeah, I saw that in the protest.
In one of the protest signs. So I feel like what he's going for kind of is like horror films are treated in the exact same way as pornography. And that's why he's used the adult industry as kind of the metaphor for horror films. And so I wonder if he almost sees himself as MaXXXine, that he's super talented as a director. I don't think anyone would really deny that. But can he ever win an Oscar at this point? Or is he tainted by his horror background? And maybe I have no idea. I've not read any interviews. I know nothing. This might be conjecture. But I wonder if he has tried to break into the mainstream at all and hasn't been able to because they're like, oh, you're just a horror director.
Yeah, I that's a very interesting take because I hadn't even made that connection between him and MaXXXine. And I mean, okay, what if we mention a name like Mike Flanagan, who seems to be everybody's sweetheart?
Yeah.
And yet he's made a ton of horror.
Has he been mainstream though? Like he's in the horror community, I think, celebrated. But like, would he win an Oscar for something?
Well, I don't know about that.
Like, it seems like these films are very focused on like she wants to be famous and she considers conventional cinema. There's some examples, but I think there's very few directors who are horror directors who have gotten. I mean, Stanley Kubrick to some extent.
Wes Craven did the bulk of his stuff was either horror or pretty dark.
Yeah, like I can't think of many examples off the top of my head where you have like a very prominent horror director who was also very celebrated in a mainstream way or has won Academy Awards or.
Yeah, I think that would be.
Even the actors in some cases, right? Yeah. Like, is Mia Goth also relegated to
exactly
indie horror status because she's done lots of horror films now, even though she's amazing?
And I wonder about that with Anya Taylor-Joy because she's done a bunch of horror, but she's also done some pretty high.
That's true. She's done more mainstream stuff, I think. Yeah.
But yeah, that's an interesting question because I think, I hadn't thought about it that way. And I wonder if he does feel some of that. Like I'm not respected in my career because I do these types of films.
Because it seems like even though each film is so different from each other tonally and in terms of setting and how they operate and their conventions, the thread that seems to connect the three of them is this like want to be famous, but they can't.
Yeah.
Mostly because of the adult industry or like this striving for fame and they can't get there. And so I just wonder if he feels that because he's very celebrated by horror fans.
Yeah.
But to my knowledge, doesn't get much play in terms of mainstream. I think he maybe even tried to do some television stuff in between.
Yeah.
Because he's been gone from the horror scene for a while. But I don't know enough to know if that's true. But I'd be curious to hear interviews with him and see if that's true.
Yeah.
But like, when you think of the three films or what they're going for, like, is there anything that comes to mind what you think he's trying to say? That's what I was more thinking of during this film more than.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if
there's a lot of religion things too, I think.
Yeah.
Or like this whole like maybe contradiction about being pure.
Yeah.
And so reveling in violence and sex, those are impure. And so we want nothing to do with that, even though the religious people in these movies are like the villains or the ones doing horrible things.
Yeah, I mean, again, this is kind of, I'm flying by the seat of my pants here, but one of the things that is interesting to me too is that I think in X and in MaXXXine, I find those interesting because, the 70s was definitely the swing in one direction.
Yes.
Right? For the social pendulum. And the 80s was conservative. And if it hadn't already swung all the way back, it was pretty close with Thatcher and Reagan and so on.
And I think that's represented here to some extent. Yeah.
But so what I think though, so as a porn star, I mean, and they mention a couple of names
You
like
mean her?
Marilyn Chambers and different people who tried to break into the Hollywood industry. So MaXXXine is an outlier
Mhm.
in terms of society's expectations, and so is Pearl. So I think I think a good part of the story has to do with these women who don't fit social conventions, but they believe in their own worth and what they want to accomplish,
Yeah.
but they're not being allowed to accomplish
And
it.
are objectively talented, I think.
Yeah.
Like, I think the reason Mia Goth works so well here is you can just see, like, in that audition, it's like, that was incredible.
Yeah,
Like, her
yeah.
acting is so good that, like, yeah, you do deserve to be doing mainstream
Yeah.
stuff. Could Mia Goth win an Oscar if she was being directed by Steven Spielberg in some high profile drama? Like,
Yeah, probably.
100%, I
Yeah.
would think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's one thing I liked about the movie, as I felt like there was a lot to try to dissect and
for
chew
sure,
on
for sure.
thematically. So
All right. Well, where are we at now? I noticed we just lost a light. So
okay. Does that mean we got to shut it down?
we didn't even last the whole episode.
Yeah.
So we'll have to figure that one out.
No, that's okay.
Um,
So yeah, I think that's mostly, I mean, this is, I think, the richest of the three. I think I definitely have to go back and watch again. Again, we just saw this in theaters. We didn't take notes. We weren't able to
Yeah.
do research. One thing I would say is that if you don't want to have other films, 2024 films, spoiled for you when you go see this in the
Yeah,
theater,
for sure.
skip the trailers, go get your popcorn, go to the washroom.
Yeah.
Because arguably they spoil Trap and they spoil
Long
the Hugh
Legs.
Grant one and Long Legs.
Heretic.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
trying these days not to watch trailers at all, but
Yeah.
it's really hard when you go to a movie in the theaters and they're showing you the trailers. So yeah, avoid those.
Complete jerkishness. Okay, well, that's for season 6, episode 1. I think that wraps it up. However, if you're watching this, let us know what you think about the new kind of setup. And we've tried some different ideas, and we've got a new space, and we haven't recorded in a while. So there's
Sorry.
a few things I
Despite the light, there's one other question I have for you.
Yeah.
Did you get the sense at the end that she was dead?
MaXXXine?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So she is standing over her father, right, with the shotgun,
Yeah.
and the helicopter's there, like, put the gun down, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to shoot you, I think was the implication.
Yes.
She shoots him, and then it goes to, like, she's imagining something, right, in the future. And what is it? The Puritan 2 is famous, and she's on the red carpet, and it's all in. That's her, like, daydreaming, I think.
I think you're right about that. I didn't get that she was.
Okay, but the very final scene, they make a reference like, okay, this is the dream sequence scene, and then it's her decapitated head on the bed, and that's the final shot. So I almost wondered if, like, that meant that she was, when she shoots her father, that she was killed. And even then, like, when the camera, like, pans out and then it, like, goes up into the sky, but they show her as well.
Yes.
It's left a bit ambiguous, but I read that as, like, she was dead, and this was, like, her final,
Interesting.
like, daydream about, you know, they're all clapping for her at the end of the scene,
Yes.
which to me didn't seem very realistic. There's a few things about that final thing
No, that didn't quite
that
jive
seemed
with you. Yeah,
really
yeah.
inconsistent with the rest of the film.
Yeah.
And especially the idea that they decided for the final shot to be, like, her decapitated head on the bed, to me suggests that she kills her father and she was killed. But I wasn't sure if you had that interpretation or if that's true, but that's just one thing I was left with.
I didn't have the same interpretation, but something didn't sit with me in the transition, and I couldn't quite figure out what it was. It was like, it seemed a bit dreamlike or excessive to have, everybody clapping for her and whatever.
And wasn't there, like, a news story like, oh, she's the one who, like, took down the, like, I don't know if that's, that seems like what she would want, her delusion of grandeur, rather than,
I guess I'll be doing some
actually
YouTube
happened.
deep dives to see if anybody's explained that.
Yeah.
There you go.
Anyways, I want to make sure I brought that up because I was curious to hear.
All right. So there you go.
All right. Well, thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of season 6, and we'll see you in the aisles.